Welcome into live coverage of the 24th running of the Tour of Magnificent Qinghai here in northwestern China, where riders must be comfortable with their head above the clouds, as it is arguably one of the highest stage races anywhere in the world. Stage 3 was the longest stage of the tour. Saw the riders leave the beautiful town of Hushu and ultimately would end up finishing in the town of Menyuan. Early on, it would be Simon Pelot, the Swiss rider from Li Ning Star, who would be joined by New Zealander George Jackson from Burgos, who would get out to a 3.5-minute lead, a lead that they would hold for almost the entire duration of the stage. The yellow jersey, well, that was on the shoulder of Guillermo Silva from Qinghai Rural, and it was their responsibility to do the chasing. Eventually, George Jackson would get to about the 140k mark and wave the white flag. His day was done. Guillermo Silva looking pretty comfortable throughout the entire day, as he did on stage 2, when he would go on and win the stage and put himself into the yellow jersey. Simon Pelot, well, he was in the King of the Mountains jersey for Li Ning Star at the start of the day, and throughout the entire stage he would pick up the maximum King of the Mountain points, ensuring that today he would still be wearing the polka dot jersey. Qilian Mulubrak, the African Continental Champion, riding for Astana, the man who won this tour 2 years ago, is still poised to still set. The minimal sprint stages on the course, it was David Baldacchini, but when it came down to ultimately the sprint finish, it would be a remarkable day for Li Ning Star Alexander Salby, picking up the victory over Manuel Penieva and Cameron Scott of the Cachet Body Wrap team, the young Australian, meaning that Manuel Penieva would retain the green sprinter's jersey heading into today's stage. Alexander Salby, the stage victory. Guillermo Silva would retain the yellow jersey, and King of the Mountains, deservedly so, would sit on the shoulders of Simon Pelot. So 5.5 hours they were in the saddle, 220 kilometres, at points reaching well over 11,000 feet. So the scene is set for today's stage. Town of Menyuan, wonderful hosts, acknowledging all the riders as they go through their customary sign-in process. And there he is, Manuel Penieva, winner of stage 1, second, stage 3, wearer of the Sprint Ace jersey. Li Ning Star, a Chinese trade team, full of internationals, but very much adopted by the locals as a Chinese team. Equipo Kerner Farmer, an all green signing in, and then it is the Qinghai Rural Sugaros team, who are just stacked full of climbers and will be incredibly hard to beat. The man leading the Asian blue jersey is Hassan, in fact Saeed Savradeh, the man from Iran. The Astana team, well, they come here with a big reputation. Can they find a way today of getting one over Qinghai Rural and possibly putting Henok Mulubran into the yellow jersey? They're a team stacked with the likes of Aaron Gate and the likes of the great Martin Lopez. This is what awaits them. It is the most stunning town, the city of Qilian. "22 trade teams Around 140 riders on the start line today. The tour started with 154, but there have been a number of withdrawals due to a number of crashes. As we look at Manuel Panieva in the green jersey. He'll be looking for another victory today. Historically, this ends up being a bit of a brunch sprint. Zaid Savraday from Hyundai Hotel. And Guillermo Silva, the responsibility of Qinghai Rural to protect him. He was second in the tour last year. Can Qinghai Rural go back to back? Simon Pelot, well, out for so much of stage 2 and out for almost the entire stage yesterday, deservedly wearing the King of the Mountain jersey. Early on, as always, at the start of most stages, a group of riders looking to try and establish an initial break. First sprint stage of the day, around about 37 kilometres. So those trying to gain valuable sprint ace points at a UCI level and also ultimately to try and challenge Manuel Panieva for the green jersey. First sprint stage at 37 kilometres. Small group of riders initially trying to get into a break. And here he is, winner of stage 1, Manuel Panieva, the Italian, riding for his Team Polti Visit Malta team. So Guillermo Silva has a 6-second lead over Casido Cepeda, who finished second on stage 2. There's this magnificent Qinghai region, the helicopter flyover, the magnificent yellow rapeseed, which covers so much of these wonderful valleys up here in the Tibetan Plateau. And so a look at today's stage. Total of 172.5 kilometres from the city of Menyuan. Initially, well, it's just a general uphill grind. Average gradient of around about 3 to 4%, no higher. However, they get above 12,000 feet when they reach the top of Jingyangling Mountain, which sits at 3,750 metres. Once having reached that, well, it's pretty much a run downhill. It's very much a stage of 2 halves. The first half uphill, the second half predominantly downhill. A niggly little climb that comes at around the 155k mark, which could provide an opportunity for somebody to attack. But really, it is a run through to the finish in the stunning, stunning town of Qilian, where a large crowd waits. The weather is absolutely magnificent, and it will absolutely blow the minds of the riders once they do get a chance to sit back and reflect on what will be another tough day, where the riders will have to be comfortable with their head above the clouds. And this is the countryside of the magnificent Qinghai region of northwestern China. There is a group of 3 riders who have gone clear, who have a minute 32. That includes Jumbo Jumps, Xingbaya, the Mongolian rider, riding for the Burgos team. We've got Cedric Christofferson, the Norwegian rider, riding for Unibet, Tiatima Rockets, and Ronel Campos from Lingstar, the Venezuelan rider. They are the 3 riders that have gone clear. But here are the boys from Qinghai Rural in absolutely idyllic conditions on pretty much A downhill stretch through to the finish with the odd little undulation, looking to shut that gap down, looking to set a tempo which will prevent those potentially challenging for the yellow jersey from going up the road. These are the three. So sitting on the front at the moment is Jumbeljam's Xingbei, the Mongolian. He certainly will be a rider that is very comfortable with riding at 9, 10, 11,000 feet. And now coming 3 for Unibet, the Team Rockets, is the Norwegian rider, Cedric Kristoffersen. And Ronil Campos. Well, peloton, that was a pretty tough last couple of days. A lot of climbing. Peloton did come apart throughout the duration of the day. Predominantly did come back together towards the end for another mass sprint finish. And the stage, of course, ended up being won by Alexander Salby from Li Ning Star. Some of the nomadic horsemen from this part of the region getting out there supporting the tour as they do every year, which will give the riders a little bit of a buzz. I'd imagine the three up front though, it'll be just a quick glance, and they're very much concentrated, very much just trying to lock themselves into the hurt box and see if they can just extend the lead. I tell you what, it is a very unique part of the world, a stunning part of the world. Such a rich history too, such a long history. So 9,000 feet on this plateau, so you can imagine that the mountains in the background sit at 15 to 17,000 feet. So Ronil Campos, I did apologise, I mentioned earlier that he was riding for Li Ning Star. Of course, that was his previous team. These days he is with Chengdu, or Chengdu as they call it over here, which will host the World Games in August. Another one of these Chinese trade teams. A number of them too. You've got the Heng Xiang cycling team, the Huangsheng Vanoa Taishan team in this race as well, the Tianyu Day Hotel cycling team, the Body Wrap team, the Phoenix Scom Hengjiang cycling team, Li Ning Star, probably their most well-known team. And so really starting to immerse themselves into national cycling are the Chinese, and obviously it was such a big, strong commercial hub opportunity for Chinese brands and businesses to take their name around the world through the sport of cycling. There's a look at the team solution check. Vinnie Vantini team, that includes the likes of David Baldacchini, won a couple of stages 2 years ago, Baldacchini, the first and last stage. So we just go back and have a look at Guillermo Silva of Caja Rural, second last year in this race. Overall, Just moving our way back through the peloton. 22 trade teams, as mentioned. And affectionately known as trade teams, ultimately they do rely on sponsorship, and it is one of those truly global sports. So if you are a big international company or an emerging company, you just want to try and connect your brand, I guess, internationally. Factor there, which is a bike brand these days, a new established bike brand. They've got a trade team simply known as Factor, and they've been very much to the fore when it comes to riding at a World Pro Tour level. As we just go back to the King of the Mountains earlier on today. In fact, that was the sprint, my apology, at 37 kilometres. Clement Alino, Diogo Uriarte picking up second place in that sprint. And this, in fact, was the King of the Mountains, the first one at 49.6 kilometres. And it came at the highest climb on the tour, the Yangling Mountain at 3,750 metres. Zaid Savradeh picking up valuable King of the Mountain points, the man from Iran. I mentioned Guillermo Silva, our yellow jersey leader, finishing second in the Tour last year. It was his fellow teammate from Ecuador, Jefferson Alvaro Cepeda, who would end up winning it. Guillermo Thomas Silva would finish 1 minute 31 behind him. And Guillermo Silva, the road racing champion of Uruguay. And that was the next of the King of the Mountain points up for grabs. It came at 74.1 kilometres. And then the final sprint of the day, well, the second to last sprint before the finish line, it comes at 97 kilometres. So a little bit of discussion going on between these two. Not sure there's a lot of real tactics to be played out just yet, rather than just keeping a really solid tempo up front, making it almost impossible for anyone to try and break. Very hard if you're sitting on there at a tempo of around 50 kilometres an hour for one rider to decide, well, I think I can go and hold 53 kilometres. Well, good luck with that. You might last 5 or 10 minutes, burn a lot of matches, and ultimately just end up suffering and then coming back into the peloton. And there is that sprint at 97 kilometres. So Zanbayar, Christopherson and Campos, that is the order, picking up 5 points for Zanbayar for the Burgos team, based out in Spain, man from Mongolia. And if you're just wondering if you're not a cycling aficionado, a little flick of the elbow is just generally a sign of saying to the rider behind, look, just come through, take your turn. It is considerably harder on the front. You get much easier just sitting in the back wheel or the slipstream of another rider, up to a 30% drag coefficient they call it. And so you can have a really high heart rate, just drop back, sit on another wheel. It's amazing just how quickly you can recover, and then come through, take another turn, and that's how they need to work it. All three riders need to just share that workload on the front, try and keep it nice and even, just want to roll through evenly, don't want to come through too quickly. Ensure that they do eat and drink. It is almost automatic at this level for these riders. Have to self-cater to a degree. They will have their team vehicles or a team vehicle that will be supporting them, providing them with refreshments, providing them with high calorie intake, generally liquid-based supplements. Come down to the individual rider in terms of what they do want to eat and drink. These type of animals, these type of horses, along with the yaks, very visible if you do travel through this part of China, through this Qinghai province. Goats. So 9,000 feet the riders are at here. Look at the mountains in the background. You can only imagine just how high this part of the world does go to. They will finish in the beautiful little town of Qilian. It's located in the Qilian Mountains. Average altitude is 3,169 metres. The town itself where they will finish of Qilian is 2,787 metres. Average year-round temperature in this particular part of China is 1 degree Celsius. The climate type is what they describe as a highland climate. Awful lot of rivers through when you do drive through this part. In fact, I've been told that there are more than 240 rivers in the county. The main rivers, the Mole River, the Black River, the Barbaoa River, and the Chioli River. Annual runoff of 2,322 billion cubic metres. Euskaltel Ustadi, great Spanish team. These days riding more at a Pro Tour level. For a long time, we were part of the World Tour. It just brings such credibility to any bike race as we just have a look there at some of the damage that has been done on some of the descents for the particular riders. On some of the descents, it has got a little bit gladiatorial at times. Riders incredibly tired. Rider there with the bandages, Attilio Viviani, and/or Ganzabal, my apologies. Of course, Viviani riding for Team Solution Tech. Vinny Fantini, potentially a rider who could end up winning the sprint if it does come down to a sprint finish today. But that Euskaltel Ustadi team, the likes of Johnny Getty, Jochen Miguelde, Dina Martin, Biscara or Mikel Biscara, Jordi Lopez, Xavier Ieza, under Ganzabal. And so predominantly flat stage, but you're just looking ahead there, just this little bit of false flat, 2 to 3% gradient. These three are working nicely together. 3 riders is a really good number in terms of a break. 4 ideal. If everybody's buying in, it just means you can push a little bit harder at the front, knowing that you've got just a little bit more recovery before you've got to take your turn again. Beautiful pedal cadence there coming from the man from Mongolia. Jumbo jumps Xingbaya. Jumbo jumps Xingbaya, and he's 28 years of age. He won the yellow jersey in the Tour of Thailand back in 2021. He's a 3-time national champion of Mongolia in the individual time trial. He won those in 224, 225, and back in 2022 his first victory there. He's had 2 third-place finishes at the Asian Continental Championship road race. Of course, we do have the African Continental Champion in the race, and that, of course, is Henok Mulubran, the man who won the Tour 2 years ago, 4th last year, won the green jersey last year out of Eritrea. The one African nation that's really starting to establish a reputation in the sport of cycling. Vinny Gourmet, of course, their most famous rider, having won 3 stages last year in the Tour de France, and being the first black rider to win stages in the Tour de France, and the first African rider to win a major jersey in the biggest race on the planet. mentioned this yesterday, but just go through it. We've got Guillermo Silva, who was in the yellow jersey. He is actually the National Road Racing Champion of Uruguay. We've got Martin Laas, who is the National Road Racing Champion of Hungary. We've got Paul Wright, the National Road Racing Champion of New Zealand. And we've got David Cadena, the National Road Racing Champion of Mexico. And Cadena these days riding for Petrolike. Paul Wright, the New Zealander, riding for Factor Racing, quality bike rider. And of course Martin Laas riding for Euskaltel Ustadi. And as mentioned, Guillermo Silva riding for the Qinghai Rural team. So if you do win the National Road Race Championship in your country, you get to incorporate your national colours within the trade team colours. Very prestigious for the trade teams to have a National Road Racing Champion. So these three out in front doing a good job, because this peloton has certainly got a good tempo going on. One big long line. Can be for two reasons. They're heading slightly downhill here, or the fact that the pace is on. It's more the fact that it's probably a little bit more downhill. Opportunity for some of the riders to have a wee toilet stop. That is a skill set in itself. Speak to some riders, they do get just a little bit of stage fright occasionally when they do need to take a bathroom stop, prefer to pull over on the side of the road. So Jambal Jamps Zimbaya, the Mongolian, for Burgos on the front. Sitting second wheel from Unibet Titima Rockets is Cedric Christopherson. And there at the back is Ronil Campos. Just having a look at Ronil Campos, these guys riding for Chengdu, DYC cycling team. He's had 3 GC victories at the Vuelta Al Tashera back in 2021, 222, and also back in 220. He was third at his national championships in Venezuela in the road race back in 2016. Describes himself as a GC rider, also a very good hill climber. As the Qinghai Rural team just continue to press and dance on the pedals, that is a responsibility of when you have the yellow jersey on the shoulders of one of your riders. That's why so often in events like the Tour de France, you will see a lot of the big teams not really wanting the yellow jersey in that first week. Because they'll tell you the jersey, it is not won in the first week of the tour. And when you've got the yellow jersey, you just don't want to be burning too many matches. You'd rather hand the yellow jersey over to another team, a team maybe full of sprinters, knowing that 1 or 2 big Queen stages in weeks 2 and 3 will ultimately decide the tour, and you want to make sure you're keeping your powder dry, that you've got the team that can set the tempo at the front, that can support their team captains, can support their GC riders. Clothing these days, of course, you can see how skin tight it is. There's been a real innovation in helmets and clothing, smallest of margins. Aerodynamics, of course, kick in at 17%, so you want to make sure that you're not creating any drag by having loose clothing. Bikes these days, well, there is a limit in terms of what they can do aerodynamically with them. Fairly standard sort of setups right across all 22 teams, but each rider will still have slightly different angles on their frame, the size of the frame. Gear ratios will be different. That'll come down to individual physiology. They will change their gearing based on obviously the topography of each stage. Today, relatively moderate stage in terms of climbing, nothing particularly steep, more just the altitude, the big factor, knowing that the second half of today's stage predominantly downhill, so they'll probably be running much bigger gears, where yesterday we saw a lot of the riders using some pretty big clusters or some pretty big chain rings on the back as part of their gearing, just so that they could spin a little bit more. Just see the good form here from Jumbaljans Zimbaya, the Mongolian. Small man, but nice and tucked position, looking pretty controlled. No upper body movement, no head movement. Really nice and smooth, really high cadence. That's obviously what works for him. Some riders will prefer to push just a bigger gear, more of a time trial type gear. And again, it comes down to individual physiology. As riders do start to get fatigued, they'll often tend to lean a little bit more on bigger gears. That's often a sign of fatigue. And it just means that you will end up using a lot more fast twitch fibre, and therefore your glycogen levels can deplete a lot quicker. So you've got to make sure that you do stay on top of your drinking and your eating throughout the stage, throughout the day. As I mentioned, that'll be pretty well practiced right down to breakfast, how these riders will get their nervous system up, their warm-up protocols, individually and collectively, will be established. And we'll go through the good times and the bad times in these stages. Sometimes when you are just feeling a little bit flat, not a bad thing just to come to the front, put yourself on the front and power yourself a little bit, get your heart rate up. And that can just sometimes, I don't know, almost just click the nervous system in, and you drop back into the peloton, and suddenly you feel a little bit better. Yesterday's stage, obviously, the longest at 221 kilometres. As we have a look at Alexander Salby, the man who won the stage yesterday. What a moment it was for him. Man from Denmark, riding for Leaning Star. Yeah, total time yesterday's stage for the 221 kilometres was 5 hours and 31 minutes and 53 seconds. So often when you are feeling that time, you can go through a lot of highs and lows. You can spend 3 hours sort of struggling a little bit in the hurt box, and then you can just come right at the right time. It can often go the other way too. And what an absolute warrior this man is here, Simon Pilot, riding for Leaning Star. Watched his teammate Alexander Salby win the stage, but really over the last 2 days he's been the man that's been out the front getting the television coverage, and deservedly deserves to be in that polka dot jersey, having picked up maximum points yesterday across all three King of the Mountain points. Really contrasting conditions. Wet, cold yesterday, today warm, no wind, which is probably the big area of concern for the riders. When you can get these clear days, you can get the crosswinds, which can cause havoc. Generally you can tell when there's a crosswind because you'll sort of see the zigzags, the snake across the road. And it can be very difficult when the pace goes on into a crosswind in terms of where you position yourself. So one of the team vehicles coming to the fore, feeding all three riders. Commissaires will be watching, just making sure that they're not holding on to those drink bottles for too long, or they're not getting any outside assistance. Like all sports, there is a grey area and riders will try and push it at times. And there we go, nice opportunity just to have a look at some of the bikes too. A real revolution in the bikes these days, much wider tyres, less air pressure than what historically was always ridden. Science so much apart, not just in terms of the athlete individually and the way they train and eat, rest, recover, but also the equipment now being used. Gone are the days of just the alloy wheels with the spokes. Now it's deep carbon rim wheels with minimal spokes. It's all about stiffness. It's all about making sure that you don't lose energy every time you're putting power through those pedals. So we look at the Euskatelli Stadi boys. Coming back down through the tour. Then we've got the VF Group Bardiani team. The likes of Luca Colnaghi, Manuel Torossi, Enrico Zanoncello, who has the ability to win today's stage. Just sitting in behind them too, the team Solution Tech team of David Baldacchini, Alessandro Iacci, Andrea Piras. He is another rider who potentially could win today's stage. Hope you are enjoying live coverage here of Stage 4 of the 24th edition of Tour of Magnificent Qinghai. We are heading into the Qilian county of the region. The final destination is the township of Qilian, which really is just the most picturesque town. Got a real alpine feel about it. Beautiful river running through it, surrounded by snowy mountains. Beautiful greenery. Very, very friendly people. And so just a minute 8 now, 4 out, 3 out in front. All sorts of little protocols in place, even for the camera crews, in terms of where they position themselves on the motorbikes, between bunches, not allowing groups to be given targets. Obviously don't want to get too close in terms of just disrupting the riders or getting in front where the riders can potentially get into the slipstream of the motorbike. But really nice form again being shown by Jumbel Jumps, Xingbaya, one of the greats to come out of Mongolia. Cedric Christopherson looking comfortable as well. So Christopherson, 23 years of age, won a stage in the South Aegean Islands back in 2023, second in GC in the South Aegean Islands Tour that same year. 7th on GC in this event back in 2023, so he's very familiar with the Tour of Magnificent Qinghai. He'll be aware of what this particular tour has entailed for all of these athletes and the ability to prep and I guess visualise in the lead up to this event on an annual basis. And don't underestimate the importance of just being able to visualise, being able to tap into the intel that you've gained through having ridden here previously, being able to share that with those riders maybe here on debut. There are a number of riders here who have never ridden this race before. In fact, 93 of the 150 odd are here for the first time. And it's a pretty big learning curve because it is a very unique tour. Very few races around the world which start at 7,500 feet, which was the case here in Stage 1 in this downtown city of Xining, the capital of the Qinghai province. And throughout the week go as high as 13,000 feet. And after Stage 1, never really drop below 8,500 feet. It's not a race that you can replicate. You can replicate the terrain. You can set up your training around some of the topography and the geometry and the altitude of each stage. The gradient of the climbs, but you just cannot prepare for the altitude that you will endure. Really nice look at the setup here. So you can just see in that little small cog at the back, either running as 11 or 12, so might have one gear to go to. But obviously just coasting downhill, big chainring on the front. Maximum power, biggest gear he's got. It's at the back of the peloton by the looks of it. Absolutely beautiful day though, very warm here in the city of, or the township, it's probably the best way of describing it, of Qilian. Good crowd starting to gather. A lot of festivities, a lot of colour in the region. Very proud of their culture. And that's just a wonderful shot, isn't it? The pain train. Well, maybe not so painful for those sitting back because they'll just be enjoying that drag coefficient, but those riders up front, certainly the rider on the front, doing a lot of the work here. Looking to just try and bridge that gap up to our 3 escapees. Does come down to a sprint finish. A lot of world-class sprinters in the group. Do you see a bit of a change here? So we've got the Team Poltec Visit Malta rider on the front. They'll be looking to try and set the stage win up today for Manuel Menyuan, who wears the green jersey, who did win stage 1 in the downtown capital city of Zinning. But Martin Laas is another one from Quick Pro Team, who comes in as the highest ranked sprinter in this year's tour. Alexander Salby, who won yesterday, comes in rank 3. Aaron Gate, the New Zealander, 4-time Commonwealth Games gold medalist back in 2022 when they were held in Birmingham. He's also won the road race as well as 3 track gold medals. Bit of a national hero back in New Zealand, the man Enrico Zanoncello, who won stage 2 in last year's tour, riding for VF Group Bardiani, is another one who potentially could win a stage. Equipo Kerner Farmer, represented by Miguel Fernandez. Got the likes of Cameron Scott for the Cachet Body Wrap team, the Australian. Finished 3rd in yesterday's stage. Luca Colnaghi from VF Group Bardiani. Mattia Panazzi is another one from that very strong sprinting team, Bardiani. And certainly you don't rule out the likes of Henok Mulubran too. He won the green jersey last year. Won the race overall two years ago. And arguably probably the best all-round rider in the peloton. Some will say that that might not be fair on possibly his fellow teammate Martin Lopez, but certainly when it comes to this particular tour, and if you look through the historical data, Henok Mulubran might just be the most complete rider in the peloton, certainly at this altitude. Yeah, just amazing infrastructure. So 9,000 feet, and those hills in the background. You wonder what height they might be. Now, really good shot here of just more of the equipment. We've got the radio earpieces in. Being able to just receive instruction from their director sportif sitting back in their team cars. Be given time checks and time updates on exactly what the brake is doing. And of course, the calculations are done in terms of who are the riders in the brake. Can we afford to let them go? Oh yeah, almost a little bit of the Madison that you see in track cycling. bit of a helping hand. I'll tell you what, this man here's got a head like granite. How tough is he? Stage 2 and 3 just out for so much of it. Just see the peloton here, just enjoying a little bit of a downhill run. Just any chance to just take a little bit of pressure off the legs, knowing just how brutal this tour is. Still another 4 stages to come following today, so any chance just to give the muscles a little bit of a break. As we just go back and have a look at the man wearing the blue jersey, he's the best Asian rider, Saeed Savradeh from Tianudate Hotel, a man from Iran. Good to see the Iranians in here as well. They've also got Hassan Saifullah Hifad, also riding for the same team. So a sport that is truly international. 163 for Li Ning Star, acting as the bit of a domestique. And why not for Simon Pelot? He deserves a bit of a day off. Started the day in that King of the Mountains jersey with 27 points. The next best is John Aguirre from Riskastel Ustadi, back on 11. Petros Mengs from Istanbul team, another one of the Eritrean riders, sitting currently in 3rd place on 9 points. And then it is the Iranian who sits 4th overall in the points classification. Prior to the start of today's stage, Hassan Saifullah Hifad from the Tianudate Hotel cycling team, and then George Jackson, the New Zealander, who was out for so much of yesterday's stage along with Simon Pelot. Qinghai region, well, it's, as mentioned, it is located in the northern eastern part of the Tibetan Plateau. It's the Yellow River originates in the southern part of the province, while the Yangtze and the Mekong have their sources in the southwestern part. Now, the Qinghai Lake, which a lot of this tour is based around, is the largest salt lake in China, second largest in the world. And so it is the man in the green jersey who at the moment is more than happy to sit here on the front. And then is Manuel Peñalva. Certainly a rider who has the ability to win the sprint stage today. So we go back and have a look at the yak, which a big part of the farming in this part of the world, a big dietary source for a lot of the locals. It's a region though that you will find musk, you will find deer, I'm told there are 20 species of wild animals found in this particular part of the Qinghai province, the Qilian county. So a chance just to continue that food intake, which is just, well, it's the second discipline. No different than a car. You've got to fuel it if you want to be effective, if you want to be efficient. And so a chance there for Cedric Christopherson. So very much predominantly downhill for most of the remainder of this stage. The last 40 kilometres, they should knock that out in around about 45 minutes. No real wind out on the course. 45 to 50 minutes. What is slightly different for a lot of the sprint stages is the sprint up to the finish line here is slightly uphill. So it does have a bit of a false flat, probably about a 2% gradient. So not just a good sprinter, you're going to need to be a strong sprinter. And if you're not the fastest, but you are one of the strongest, then probably need to take the sprint out a little bit earlier. But they do an incredible job at the end of each stage, setting up the finish line, presenting it beautifully, leveraging those partners of this year's event. We've got Robert Verveen, a Belgian cameraman in the helicopter, a man who has covered 2 Tour de France events, so supported by a wonderful cast of Chinese camera and technical staff. Qinghai rural boys, I can tell you, they can all climb. They were simply superb yesterday on stage 3. The peloton, well, it came apart at about the 35 kilometre mark when they left the town of Hushu, heading towards the finish line in Menyuan. The 35k was pretty much uphill, and the Belongjiang Pass, which was 3,470 metres, really saw the peloton blow to pieces, come apart at the back, and the one team that had its full contingent at the top were the Qinghai rural boys. And you just sense that psychologically the likes of Henok Mulubran, riding for a starter, must have just been looking around going, how over the next 5 stages am I going to beat Guillermo Silva? Where will that opportunity come? And how can I drop this particular team that are just so strong, and that Qinghai rural team of Alex Diaz, Juan Bo, Samuel Fernandez, Francisco Penuela, Guillermo Silva, the race leader, Tyler Stites, the American, and of course Fernando Barcello. Absolutely beautiful road surface, stunning conditions. Talked a little bit about yesterday, but you will see these days the riders will have a lot less air pressure in their tyres than what historically used to be the case. Almost counterintuitive. Gone are the days of putting 140 or 120 psi in the tyres. These days it might be about 90. It still will come down to the individual, still come down to their own team sports scientists, but around about 90, sometimes as low as 70 psi. Much wider tyres, science says they roll better. As we have a look at the setup here, part of the reason for the softer tyres, it just means that the body's not taking as much vibration. And every time the body is receiving vibration, the muscles are basically burning more energy. I used the analogy yesterday, if you rub your hands together, you feel the heat that builds up. Well, that's obviously requires a lot of energy to create that heat. And vibrations through the body have a fairly similar simulation, and over a long period of time, it just means that you fatigue a lot quicker. So therefore, softer tyres, softer ride, less energy used. And these are just the subtle little changes we've seen in the sport as sports science and sport continues to grow globally and becomes a lot more commercial, and the percentages between good and great become 0.001%. It's all of these little things that add up. So really interesting here to see the team from Polti visit Malta, deciding to join Kaharurul at the front of the peloton. Clearly mean business today. I'd love to pick up another second stage victory. Talked about the different number of Chinese trade teams starting to establish themselves on the Pro Tour, but very much have a United Nations feel about them. Australians, Kiwis, Polish riders, athletes out of Belarus, Russian riders, Hungarian riders. I know the riders from outside of China are very appreciative of the opportunity that these Chinese trade teams do give them to live the dream of being a professional athlete, looking for, I guess, a stepping stone to higher honours as part of the World Tour, and looking to maybe use the Pro Tour here, riding for these teams, as a bit of an audition for some of the bigger World Tour teams. The Chengdu cycling team. We just saw O'Neill Campos there. It's also supported by Andrei Stepanov back in the peloton. Roman Maikin. Then you've got the Belarusian time trial specialist and Yoan Sobal. Timofey Ivanov, who actually wore the King of the Mountains jersey at the end of day one. He managed to get himself into a bit of a break through the streets of Zinning. So great to see the Chengdu trade team at the front of the spike race. One of those just niggly little climbs. There is a tough little climb that is going to come for these riders towards the finish line that just does have a little bit of a bite to it. It'll come with around about 15 kilometres of this stage remaining. It is probably the last opportunity for a rider to try and steal a stage. They're going to have to hit it, and they're going to have to hit it hard. New Zealand rider Aaron Gate, the type of hill climb, the type of opportunity that might entice him. So it is David de Cassan, by the looks of it, who might be the rider from Team Polte Visit Malta, who's sitting on the front. Just sure John Aghetti for Euskaltel Stadi going through. Quick Pro team in the pink and sky blue. As we go back to the front of the peloton. So still doing a really good job to keep this peloton at bay. 1 minute and 14 seconds. At very least, they give their sponsors and those corporates that get behind these teams some television time. Pictures go out around the world. It's an opportunity to connect that brand. That is a return on investment, and don't underestimate that. That is incredibly important in a very competitive global market these days, with so many sports that offer the same opportunities. So the minimum weight on a bike these days is 6.8 kilograms, 15 pounds. It was sort of established really to ensure a baseline level of safety and I guess prevent teams from using excessively lightweight bikes that might compromise rider safety or, to a degree, an unfair competitive advantage. I mean, obviously, the lighter you go, you start to compromise maybe some of the engineering, some of the stiffness. A lot of sports are similar. So I saw Tyler Steets there, number 46 for Kaha Rural. There's one of those two riders up front, just leading this peloton, setting the tempo, doing the hard yards. 27-year-old American, won the Tour of Qilian back in 2024. He's had 3 stage victories, also at the Tour of de Beauce. Second at the National United States Road Racing Championship back in 2022, and also was second in the individual time trial in 2024. So obviously an American rider with big hopes, a rider of real quality and class. This Tyler Steets, sitting second wheel at the moment in this peloton. So the first stage of this year's tour was won by Menyuan from Team Polte Visit Malta. Stage 2, which was a tough stage, was won by our man in the yellow jersey, Guillermo Thomas Silva. And then yesterday's stage won by Alexander Salby of Li Ning Star, who will add their name to what is really establishing itself as one of the great tours. And great to see. Still a bit of a sense of humour in the peloton. And we saw it before with a little bit of a smile for Euskaltel Stadi. It was Joaquin Gialdi, one of 6 Spanish riders in that team. Only a non-Spanish rider in Euskaltel Stadi is the Italian Martin Laas. VF Bardiani, well, they've got 6 Italian riders out of 7. Rojas, or Vicente Rojas, is the only non-Italian in that particular team, and he comes from Chile. Equipo Kern Farmer are predominantly all Spanish riders. The Cachet Body Wrap team, well, it's very much an Australian trade team. Likes of Cameron Scott, William Heffernan. We saw Tali Lane Walsh yesterday get into a little bit of a mini break towards the end of stage 3. Martin Karp, Will Heath and Finn Walsh. Alistair Christie Johnston making up that Australian trade team. Such a wonderful sporting nation, aren't they? The Australians, and pretty much have a point of view at the highest level of most sports. So we see the riders come through that sprint stage at 144.2 kilometres. Tell you starting today, Manuel Paniova in that green jersey with 30 points. Alexander Salby just a point back, so we could see a change there. And our yellow jersey leader, Guillermo Silva, sitting 3rd on the points general classification with 27. Back in 4th place on 24 points is Miguel Fernandez from Equipo Kern Farmer with 24. And then the great Henok Mulubrand, the man from Eritrea riding for Astana, sitting in 5th place with 19 points. It'll only be a matter of time before we get one of these big long stretches, and that peloton will see our 3 escapees, and that will just give them that little bit more of an incentive, provide them a little bit of a target, and they'll shut that gap down pretty quickly. Just looking at Paul Wright there, the New Zealand road racing champion, number 111, riding for the Factor Racing team. Boy, what a moment for him early in the year in New Zealand, beating some very good bike riders, the likes of George Bennett, the likes of Aaron Gate, who is pretty much the team leader for the Astana team at this year's tour. Probably the most impressive rider so far in the Factor Racing team has been the big man, Nij Komach, time trial champion of his native country of Slovenia. Type of guy that you'd love to have in a break because he's just such a powerful human being. Guy that you can just get to go on the front, do some big laps, some big turns for you. You'll see these riders too with their little computers sitting on the top of their handlebars. That'll have their power output, so how much power they're pushing every time they turn the pedals. And they'll have also the heart rate monitor attached to that as well, and they'll be working on the 2, and they know what their training physiology is, what their high aerobic zone is in regards to watts, what their anaerobic threshold is in regards to watts, what their aerobic wattage should be based on training and based on data from previous races. They'll download a lot of their data from stages and map that and use that as future reference to similar stages. They'll do a lot of training in certain zones so that they can continue to push those numbers higher. And obviously power output is based on your body weight. So you could have someone who pushes much higher power, but they could be a lot heavier rider. general consensus when it does come to power output. It's basically best measured by your functional threshold power. So when you're sort of just starting to get into the hurt box, well, best way of probably describing it, it represents the maximum power you can sustain for 1 hour. Now, generally anything above 3 watts per kilogram of body weight for men, or 2.5 watts per kilogram for women. Now, obviously that's going to can vary a lot based on where you are in your training program and based on your own level of fitness, but you're doing pretty well if you can hold 3 watts per kilogram of body weight for an hour. Now, the top pro cyclists, of course, can sustain higher wattages, sometimes exceeding 400 watts for extended periods, and even reaching up to 1,000 to 1,200 watts for very short bursts, which is probably what we will see when these riders do come into the town of Qilian and do contest that sprint. And it will come down to a sprint finish, because that chase group is now just 52 seconds up the road, and there is some real momentum in the peloton. Still on the front is Team Pulte Visit Malta rider, our green jersey leader, Menyuan. So is he looking to try and win the stage, or is he looking to try and set it up for one of his fellow teammates? This wonderful Tibetan Plateau, this beautiful part of northeastern China. The Qinghai province now starting to come into the Qilian county. The town of Qilian will welcome these riders. It is a beautiful town. The stage is set. Magnificent to see so many colours, so many world-class riders with such a stunning backdrop. One niggly little climb to come shortly. Possibly the last opportunity for a rider to attack. It'll be a short, sharp little burst. Kaha Rural will be aware of it. They'll want to keep a pretty strong tempo. We'll want to make it difficult for any rider to try and break free, and then try and maintain and sustain the momentum over the top. Just trying to sort of understand a little bit about Team Pulte Visit Malta, and the fact that Menyuan is on the front doing a lot of the work, and whether or not what might be the consequences of doing that when it comes to what is a very difficult sprint stage on a slight uphill to the finish line. And then I just wonder whether maybe they're setting up for Gabriele Raccagni, the Italian, the 23-year-old. So I just wonder whether Raccagni might just be the intended recipient of this lead-out train. Might just have the fresher legs. Perhaps they feel he might be the best chance of winning the stage, and thus they've got Menyuan at the front of the peloton. Now just 20 kilometres to go. More and more pine trees start to emerge here at parts as you get closer to the town of Qilian. You almost feel like you're somewhere in the middle of Europe, potentially Canada, New Zealand even, with its alpine setting and the rivers and the pine trees. It really is just a unique part of the world. It's just on a scale like you cannot imagine. You're just going back to the Italian rider for Team Polti, Visit Malta, Gabriele Raccagni. He's just 22 years of age. He was 12th at the National Championships, an individual time trial at under 23 level back in 2023. He's yet to probably have that true breakthrough performance. Will it come today for the Italian? They will be aware that now they're under the 20-kilometre mark. They'll also be aware, though, that peloton is closing and closing quickly. The arrowhead formation, 2 teams at the front driving it. Team Polti, Visit Malta, and the team that wears the yellow jersey, Caja Rural Seguros. The big American, Tyler Stites, having done a lot of the work. Fernando Bacello, a man who finished 9th on GC 2 years ago at the Qinghai Tour. But now it is all Team Polti, Visit Malta, who have now moved to the front. Which one of their riders will they look to try and launch for another stage victory? Big George Jackson, another one of the New Zealanders, a boy from the Burgos team. Won the first stage in the Tour of Hainan. He's another one that potentially could steal the sprint. Shouldn't underestimate either. Back-to-back days for the likes of Alexander Salby from Leading Star. Superb yesterday, won it comfortably in the finish. Cameron Scott from Cachet Body Wrap, the Australian, Luca Colnaghi. And then, of course, you can never underestimate the brilliance of Enrico Zanoncello. Zanoncello, the 27-year-old Italian, won a stage 2, I think it was, in the Tour of this tour last year. He won a stage last year as well, or 2 years ago in the Tour of Taihu Lake. Had a lot of second-place finishes. He's certainly an athlete that is capable. And now we are about to see the escapees be pulled back by the peloton. And well, it's been a courageous ride from these 3, but on a stage where predominantly the second half is all downhill, it was always going to be a tough ask to stay away. And now the Team Polti, Visit Malta team, will just continue to come to the front, drive the pain train, set the pace, set the tempo. And there he is, a man who would love to steal stage 4 to go with the victory he had in stage 2. In fact, stage 1, my apologies. Guillermo Silva just tucked in nicely. Simon Pelot easily in charge of the King of the Mountains, just making sure that he is there on this last niggly little climb. And they're almost at that climb, so if there is going to be any opportunity for somebody to steal the stage, it's about to come now, folks. So does Henok Mulubran look to take his chance? Does a rider We see possibly Aaron Gate, the New Zealander, look to try and steal a stage. Might have negotiated all of it. Now the run down through to the finish line. 17.6 kilometres to go. Talked about this stage. 172.5 kilometres the first. 75 kilometres to 80 kilometres was all uphill. And really, the last 90 kilometres predominantly all downhill. So 172.5 kilometres. I'm going to suggest today that it's going to be 172 kilometres of hope and basically 500 metres of truth. It is a tough, tough uphill sprint. Henok Mulubran there, just to the right, at the back in the colours of white, green, yellow and black. Jersey representing him being the African Continental Champion is set and poised. He's a very good sprinter. The game of cat and mouse won't start just yet. So it might just be here Hassan Saifullah of Iran, who has gone out from the Tianude Hotel cycling team. Saeed Savradeh, the other athlete out of Iraq, is a member of that team as well. Also supported by Li Zhaijin and Xinkan Wang of the People's Republic of China. Zhurong Gao as well, so 3 Chinese riders in that team. 2 from Iran. So 14.7 kilometres. Be a little bit of tactical nous here. And it'll be a bit of a reconnaissance. There is a long, long run through to the finish, and it'll be a little bit technical. A couple of little right-hand turns through the town of Qilian before the finish. Big crowd gathering. It really is spectacular, folks. So a relatively easy day for a lot of the riders in the peloton today, and probably needed it, coming off the back of 2 very, very difficult stages, stages 2 and 3. When I say easy day, I say that with a bit of a smile because, as I said, they're at 9,000 feet, and so when you've got that level of oxygen deprivation, it's never an easy day. Altitude has an effect on the body. A physiological change starts to come at 2,000 feet, so you can imagine what 9,000 feet feels like. Almost in a constant state of hypoxia. And there it is, the pine trees start to come into play here, got a real alpine feel about it. So, Foliafard just decides, well, look, I'll go up the road too. I'll give myself a little bit of a chance, grab a bit of television time. Might just be a simple case of trying to give something back to the team that supported him. So he very much describes himself as a one-day racer. He is the national champion of Iran. He won that in 2024. Finished second in the stage in the Tour of Iran at Azerbaijan back earlier this year. Was runner-up in the National Road Race Championships of Iran as well back in 2022. Again, looking for that big breakthrough performance. And this is that last nasty little climb, last little dig. before we get inside the 10-kilometre mark. And that'll go incredibly quickly. Peloton sitting there between 50 and 60 kilometres an hour now. And when they get into sprint mode, reach speeds of 70 to 75 kilometres an hour. Probably not on today because the stage is slightly uphill, but certainly hit speeds of 70, you'd think. So total race time, 3 hours and 30 minutes. So pulled back in. Now the game of cat and mouse. Does anyone else look to try and launch? Stage 5 tomorrow. Well, it goes from the town they're about to finish in, Qilian, to the town of Gangcha. And that is a tough day because over the first 28 kilometres, they go from 2,700 metres up to 3,800 metres inside the first 28k. Second big climb comes at about the 93 kilometre mark, and that is the Heitai mountain at 3,865 metres. And pretty much the average of tomorrow's stage is around 3,600 metres. So you can understand why the peloton today have tried to just keep things together, give everybody a little bit of chance to recover, freshen up, knowing that the Queen stage, stage 5, comes tomorrow, total distance of 168.7 kilometres. So, really interesting to see here the Petrolite team on the front. Another break looking to come, this time in the form of the Tiangahu cycling team. Another one of these Chinese trade teams. Tell you what, keep an eye on Vadim Pronsky, another very, very good bike rider, a man who's not afraid to go up on his own. Got into the break initially on day 1 in the streets of Zinning. The Petrolite team includes the likes of Edison Alejandro Casillas, Jose Antonio Prieto, Jonathan Casido, Edgar Cadena, and Carlos Garcia. Gives you an idea too, sitting at 80 kilometres an hour. So very much on a downhill stretch here. They can reach speeds of 100 kilometres an hour. That's why the disc brakes and stuff have come into play a lot more. A little bit more effective, a little bit more efficient. The ability to decelerate a little bit quicker. You don't clearly heat up the alloy rims like rubber brakes used to do, and potentially, if you heat them up too much, you could potentially blow the inner tube. And look at that in the background. I talked about the city and the town of Qilian where they will finish. That is the backdrop, folks. This town sits at 9,000 feet, so you can imagine just how high those mountains in the background are. And a few days ago they did have snow here. It's very warm today though. And there was a big crowd gathered, sitting back, knowing that 8 kilometres from now, another chapter will be written in the Tour of Magnificent Qinghai, the 24th edition. So yesterday it was Alexander Salby, narrowly over Manuel Pineda, the first sprint stage on day one through the streets of Zinning. And it was Pineda who won that. Number one ranked sprinters in this peloton: Martin Laas, Aaron Gate, Enrico Zanoncello, Miguel Fernandez, the likes of Norman Vatra from the China Antimentec team, Cameron Scott, the Australian, Henok Malulabrand. Who gets the stage victory? Li Ning Star have come to the front on the left-hand side there. Simon Pallor, the King of the Mountains, leads a jersey, looking to try and see if they can pick up a second stage victory for Alexander Salby. He's good enough. Why not? 6.8 kilometres. They'll be wanting to just stay towards the front, stay out of trouble. Haven't yet seen Team Solution Tech, Vinny Vantini in the black and the yellow. They have a team stacked full of sprinters, the likes of David Baldacchini, Attilio Viviani, Arnaud Tissiers, the likes of Andrea Pidas. And now here they go, the game of cat and mouse. This is where you've got to be just a little bit different. This is where you've got to be a gladiator. You have no fear. You cannot hesitate. Alexander Salby there from Li Ning Star in the red and the white, just sitting back. Happy to sit on the back of the Petro-like team who are leading this bike race. Now moving up on the outside, it's the Quick Pro Cycling team looking to get Martin Laas a stage victory. Li Ning Star take it back across the other side of the road. It is game on. 5.6 kilometres. Here we go. Li Ning Star, this local trade team. It's a big sports brand here in China, probably the equivalent of a Nike or an Adidas, a brand that is starting to grow globally. Wouldn't they love to reward the people of this region, the locals, with a victory for a local trade team? All of these international riders riding for Li Ning Star and all the Chinese trade teams are very much adopted by the locals. And now moving up on the outside, we start to see Equipo Kern Pharma. They'll be looking to try and set it up for Miguel Fernandez. Salby there, still poised for Li Ning Star. The Factor Racing team beginning to also make a move. In the white, in the middle of the peloton. The New Zealand road race champion. Sits back too, and that is Paul Wright for Factor Racing. Currently sitting about fourth or fifth wheel. Well, 3.2 kilometres is going to come down to the smallest of margins. Luke Mudgway, the young New Zealander riding for Li Ning Star, also in the mix. Now start to hit 60. 65 kilometres an hour shortly. Tough sport. Bonfires in the legs, literally breathing razor blades at this point, trying to get oxygen in any way they can, literally through the eyelids. They start to look over their shoulders. The tactics begin to play out. There is the race leader, Guillermo Silva of Caja Rural. Moments left. They'll swing around. They'll see the finish line in the distance. The pain train is on its way in the downtown street of this beautiful alpine village of Qilian. Who wants it? Who grabs it? Always one of the great spectacles in any sport. Let's all go, folks. Settle back. Here we go. Alexander Salby looking very good. They're lining themselves up. 4-5 wide. Alexander Salby for Li Ning Star, looking to try and get a lead-out train going here. Can he go back-to-back in stage victories? Enrico Zanoncello looking to try and drive it home too. The man from Denmark, though, is just struggling a little bit now. He begins to make his move. Alexander Salby, can he pick up the stage victory? Starts to come back on the inside man across the far side. Oh, the stage win. And just like that, might be the Petrolite team that have picked up the victory. Your number 132 picks up the stage victory. Martin Laas, top rank sprinter, picks up the win. What a moment for him. And look what it means to him. It is Martin Laas who wins stage 4 of the magnificent Tour of Qinghai. The man from Estonia. He's had 4 stage wins in the Tour of Thailand, 4 in the Tour of Chaihu Lake. He won the Tour of Estonia back in 2015. It's been a long time between drinks, but how important is that to him? And Guillermo Silva, well, he'll remain in the yellow jersey. Caja Rural doing a great job in terms of controlling the peloton. And just have a look here. Coming to the final 300 metres, and there is Laas, just launches himself down the outside. Really just in a class of his own. Aaron Gate, the New Zealander there for Astana, looking to try and grab the victory. Just didn't quite have the legs. And gets the victory narrowly over Alexander Salby, who is looking to try and go back-to-back. Oh, wonderful demonstration. Great to see Guillermo Silva there in the yellow contesting the sprint as well. But look what it means. Loses a pair of Oakley sunglasses in the process. Won't be overly concerned. The big man raises his arms, looks to the heavens. It's been a long time between drinks. What a moment for him, though. Now he gets to enjoy the accolades. Possibly coming in third place, Enrico Zanoncello, the man from VF Group Bardiani. Left his run late. Salby will pick up second. Another tough day in the great race. As we confirm the results for you, Martin Laas picks up the stage victory. Alexander Salby gets himself on the podium again. The great Enrico Zanoncello in third. Aaron Gate, the New Zealander, rounding out the top 10. And it doesn't get any easier tomorrow, folks, because stage 5 will see them go to the highest point in the tour of 3,865 metres as we take back in some of the highlights. Hope you've enjoyed the coverage here of the third stage, or the fourth stage of the tour, the Magnificent Tour of Qinghai.